My name is Daniel Warren. For 13 years, I believed I had the perfect life in Seattle. A thriving career as an architect, a beautiful craftsman home overlooking Lake Washington, and what I thought was a loving marriage to Natalie. We met in graduate school, married at 27, and built what seemed like an ideal life together. No children, by mutual choice. We both enjoyed our freedom and financial stability too much that I still remember the day we met at a contemporary art exhibition at the Seattle Art Museum. Natalie wasn't an architect. She worked in pharmaceutical marketing. She was standing before an abstract sculpture, thoughtfully studying it, when I approached and offered my interpretation. That chance conversation turned into hours walking along the waterfront, which evolved into regular dates, and eventually led to a proposal at Cary Park with the Space Needle illuminated against the night sky. After graduation, I joined a prestigious architectural firm while Natalie began working for Northwest Pharma. We bought our first place in Capitol Hill, a tiny one-bedroom that barely fit our combined possessions, but it was ours. 4 years later, we upgraded to a stunning Craftsman in Madison Park, with a wraparound porch where we'd have Sunday morning coffee and plan our future together. Natalie excelled in her career, quickly climbing the corporate ladder, which meant frequent business trips. Initially, these were overnight stays in Portland or Vancouver, but gradually extended to week-long conferences in Chicago, Boston, and even international destinations. I never questioned her late nights or weekend seminars. Trust was the foundation of our marriage, or so I believed. I was the kind of husband who surprised her with handcrafted gifts on random weekdays, remembered anniversaries with thoughtfully planned adventures, and supported her ambitions wholeheartedly. When she wanted to take a risky position with more travel but higher commission, I encouraged her. When she needed to invest in an executive wardrobe, I happily funded it. We had occasional disagreements, like any couple, but nothing significant, at least, that's what I told myself. Our friends often commented on how perfect we seemed together. Relationship goals, they'd say when we hosted dinner parties in our meticulously renovated home. Natalie was charismatic and vivacious in social settings, always engaging everyone in conversation, while I was more reserved but always by her side, proud of the intelligent, beautiful woman I'd married. In our 10th year of marriage, we took a second honeymoon to Costa Rica, 2 weeks of hiking through cloud forests, relaxing on pristine beaches, and staying in luxury eco-resorts. Natalie seemed distracted at times, frequently checking her phone or stepping away for urgent work calls, but I dismissed my concerns. Why wouldn't a successful pharmaceutical executive need to stay connected, even on vacation? Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. The gradual emotional distance. The new friends I never met. The unexplained expenses on our joint credit card. The way she'd flinch when I touched her shoulder sometimes, claiming stress from work. The mysterious weekend leadership retreats that seemed to multiply. But love makes you blind, and I was completely in the dark about the storm brewing in my perfect life. Our last happy moment, truly happy, without the undercurrent of deception I'd later discover, was during the holiday season the year before everything fell apart. We decorated our home with hundreds of twinkling lights, a massive Douglas fir in our bay window, and festive music playing softly in the background. We exchanged gifts by the fireplace, and Natalie gave me an antique drafting compass with our initials engraved on the case. For my forever adventure, the inscription read. The irony of that message would haunt me later. The first time I felt something was wrong was last February. Natalie had become increasingly protective of her phone, always keeping it face down and taking calls in another room. One night, I woke up at 2 a.m. to find her side of the bed empty. I found her in our home office, quickly ending a conversation when I walked in. Just work stuff? She explained with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Go back to bed. But I'd caught a glimpse of her screen. It definitely wasn't her work email open. I didn't confront her then, but the seed of doubt was planted. The following week, I noticed her perfume had changed. For years, she'd worn Jo Malone. I'd given her the first bottle on our wedding day. Now she smelled different, more intense, a scent I couldn't identify. When I mentioned it, she casually explained that her colleague Megan had recommended it. Thought I'd try something new, she said with a shrug. I'd never heard her mention a Megan before. To by mid-March, Natalie's behavior became increasingly erratic. She'd come home at odd hours, sometimes not until dawn, with elaborate explanations about emergency client meetings and system failures. Her appearance changed too. More revealing clothes, expensive jewelry I hadn't bought her, a new hairstyle that transformed her look completely. I tried to reconnect with her by suggesting weekend trips to places we loved, but she always had an excuse: deadlines, virtual conferences, client emergencies. When I surprised her at her office one day with lunch, her assistant looked confused. "Natalie called in sick today," she told me. Said she had a migraine and would be working from home. I drove home with the untouched lunch beside me, a knot forming in my stomach. Natalie's car wasn't in our driveway. When she eventually came home that evening, I asked where she'd been. "Getting a massage for my migraine," she said without hesitation. "I told you I wasn't feeling well this morning." I didn't remember her mentioning it, because she never had. But I nodded anyway, not yet ready to confront what I was beginning to suspect. That a week later, I noticed a significant withdrawal from our investment account, $50,000. When I asked Natalie about it, she claimed it was for an exclusive investment opportunity through a client. She became defensive when I asked for details. "Since when do you question my financial decisions? After all these years?" she snapped. The next day, I checked our credit card statements and found charges I couldn't explain. Expensive hotels in Seattle, our own city, where we owned a home, high-end restaurants on nights she claimed to be working late, and first class flights to Denver when she told me her company conference was in Phoenix. In April, Natalie suggested we update our life insurance policies. "We're not getting any younger," she reasoned, "and we should be prepared." She'd already contacted an insurance broker, recommended by her colleague Eric. I'd never heard her mention Eric before, but she suddenly spoke of him frequently: his investment strategies, his connections, his success in pharmaceutical sales. Then came the insurance policy. Natalie insisted we needed better coverage. She had all the paperwork ready, a $3 million policy on me, with her as the sole beneficiary. I signed without much thought. After all, it seemed like responsible financial planning. What struck me as odd was that she declined my suggestion that we take out a similar policy on her. "My company benefits are excellent," she insisted. "Besides, you're the one with the dangerous hobbies." This wasn't exactly true. My most dangerous hobby was kayaking in the lake. Hardly life-threatening. In May, she suggested a weekend getaway to a remote cabin in the Cascade Mountains during a forecast of severe storms. She insisted on driving separately, claiming she needed to visit a client in the area. "I'll meet you at the cabin," she said. The mountain pine retreat was nearly deserted due to the weather warnings. I checked in alone, waiting hours for Natalie to arrive. When she finally did, she seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone and smiling at messages that she quickly deleted. That weekend, her behavior was strange, suggesting I go hiking alone during a thunderstorm, insisting I try rock climbing on a particularly treacherous cliff face, appearing disappointed when I declined to swim in the rain-swollen river. "You've always loved adventure," she said, a strange edge to her voice. Something felt profoundly wrong, but I couldn't quite articulate it. On our last night at the cabin, I woke up to find Natalie on her laptop at 3 a.m., quickly closing it when she noticed me stirring. "Just catching up on emails," she said. But I'd glimpsed what looked like property listings, not for Seattle, but for Aspen, Colorado. The drive home was tense and mostly silent. Natalie kept making cryptic phone calls when I stopped for coffee, speaking in hushed tones and ending conversations abruptly when I returned to the car. When we got home, I found a brochure for luxury real estate in Aspen in her travel bag. When I asked about it, she claimed it was promotional material from her last corporate retreat. "Everyone gets these in their welcome packages," she explained. "You know how these luxury resorts are always trying to sell timeshares." By early June, my suspicions had grown into a gnawing certainty that something was very wrong in my marriage. I considered hiring a private investigator, but couldn't bring myself to take that step yet. Instead, I started paying closer attention to Natalie's schedule, her explanations, her increasingly frequent absences. One night, I checked her car mileage after she claimed to have been at a local conference. She'd driven over 200 miles, not local at all. Her GPS history showed a route to a lakeside property in Chelan, nearly 3 hours from Seattle. Another red flag appeared when our neighbor mentioned seeing an unfamiliar black Range Rover parked in our driveway several times while I was at work. Thought you might be considering a new vehicle, he said. Guy seemed to know the security code to your garage. I hadn't given anyone our security code. Then came Natalie's sudden interest in my outdoor activities. She suggested I take up more extreme hobbies, skydiving, mountaineering, whitewater rafting. She even gifted me an expensive mountain bike and encouraged me to try advanced trails with steep drops and dangerous terrain. You've always wanted to push your limits, she said, though I'd never expressed such desires. Most disturbing of all, she began researching poisons. I discovered this accidentally when I used her laptop while mine was being repaired. Her search history was filled with queries about untraceable toxins, plants that cause heart attacks, and substances that mimic natural death. When I casually mentioned this discovery, she laughed it off. Research for a thriller novel I'm thinking of writing, she explained. Always been a secret dream of mine. In retrospect, all the signs were there. I was just too trusting, or perhaps too afraid of what I might discover, to see them clearly. July 7th. A date forever etched in my memory. I was at home, working in my office, when I decided to make myself a cup of coffee. The espresso machine was Natalie's domain. She was particular about her coffee, but she was out at a business. Lunch. I found a new bag of coffee beans in the pantry and used them to make my drink. Within minutes, I felt strange, lightheaded, my heart racing abnormally, my vision blurring. I knocked over the cup as I stumbled toward my phone, managing to dial 911 before collapsing on the kitchen floor, but I remember fragments of what followed. Paramedics breaking down the door, the wail of sirens, the cold metal of a gurney beneath me. Then darkness that I woke up in the hospital 3 days later, tubes and wires connecting me to various machines. The doctor explained I'd suffered from severe poisoning, some kind of toxin that had caused respiratory distress and temporary cardiac dysfunction. If you hadn't called 911 when you did, she said, we might be having a very different conversation. When Natalie visited, something seemed off about her reaction. She appeared anxious rather than relieved. She kept asking about the diagnosis, what the doctors had found in my system, whether they'd run toxicology screens. Her questions focused more on the medical details than my well-being. No, thank God you're alive, or I was terrified. Instead, it was, what did they tell you caused it, and have they tested the coffee? The police opened an investigation, suspicious of the circumstances. Detective Rivera took my statement, noting that the symptoms and timing suggested intentional poisoning rather than accidental exposure. He promised to examine the contents of our home and keep me updated 0.5 days into my hospital stay. A toxicologist named Dr. Chen visited me. Middle-aged, with precise movements and careful speech, he had the demeanor of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news. Mr. Warren, we found significant traces of thallium in your system, he said gravely. It's a highly toxic metal that was once used in rat poisons before being banned due to its extreme danger to humans. This wasn't accidental exposure. The concentration suggests deliberate administration. My mind reeled as he explained. Thallium poisoning was often called the poisoner's poison because its symptoms could mimic other conditions, making it difficult to detect without specific testing. The fact that I'd been tested for it at all was due to a sharp-eyed doctor who'd seen a similar case during a fellowship in forensic medicine. Detective Rivera returned with more troubling news. We found traces of thallium in a bag of coffee. Beans in your pantry, he said, and only in that particular bag, not in any other coffee in your home. I'm not saying your wife is involved, he added carefully, but we need to investigate all possibilities. Has there been any unusual behavior lately? Financial changes? Life insurance policies? Marital problems? The questions hit me like physical blows as I connected the dots. The life insurance policy, the unexplained withdrawals, the strange behavior at the mountain cabin, her disappointment at seeing me recover. Could Natalie really have tried to poison me? I shared my suspicions and recent observations with Rivera, who took detailed notes and promised to look into Natalie's activities discreetly. Don't confront her, he warned. If she is involved, she might attempt something more desperate. Let us handle the investigation. But the real revelation came when my colleague and friend, Alex, visited. We'd been friends since architecture school, and he was one of the few people I truly trusted. Concerned by what the police had told me, he offered to help. I've got contacts who can do some digging, he said quietly. Phone records, financials, that sort of thing. Off the books, of course. Only if you want me to, Dan. I hesitated only, briefly before nodding. Do it. I need to know the truth. Within days, he returned with a USB drive and an expression that told me everything before he spoke a word. You should prepare yourself, was all he said. Alex had uncovered the devastating truth. Text messages between Natalie and her lover, Eric, planning my unfortunate accident and discussing how they would split the insurance money. He showed me message after message, each more horrifying than the last. The policy is active. 3M clean if it looks natural. Natalie, Thallium is perfect. Untraceable unless they specifically look for it, which they never do. Eric, half in his coffee, half in his protein shake. He'll think it's flu at first. Natalie after. We collect Aspen. New start, new names. Eric, I can't wait to wake up every morning without having to pretend anymore. Natalie, each message was like a knife to my heart. 13 years of marriage, and this was how it ended. With the woman I loved plotting my death for insurance money and a new life with her lover. But the most chilling part? There wasn't just one lover. There were two different men she was involved with, each manipulated into helping with different aspects of her plan. Eric was just the primary accomplice. Alex found evidence of Natalie's relationship with Marcus, a biochemist at her company, who had helped her obtain the thallium and instructed her on its use. Then there was Connor, a real estate developer, explaining her frequent client meetings, who had helped her set up property purchases in Aspen under a false identity that I also discovered she'd been siphoning funds from our joint accounts through a complex system of transfers to offshore accounts. For 2 years, she'd been methodically preparing for my death, financially, logistically, and emotionally. Everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. Alex showed me photos from her secret email accounts, intimate moments with these men while I worked late, believing I was building our future together. There were detailed plans for her new life after my death, down to the furniture she would buy for her Aspen home and the plastic surgery she planned to undergo to further distance herself from her identity as Natalie Warren. I'm sorry, man, Alex said, his voice breaking. I never would have thought she was capable of this. Neither had I. The Natalie I thought I knew. The woman who had nursed me through pneumonia during our 3rd year of marriage, who had surprised me with a golden retriever puppy on my 35th birthday, a dog she'd later claimed had run away, but had actually given away because it interfered with her activities, who had stood beside me at my father's funeral, was a carefully constructed fiction. When Detective Rivera returned the next day, I shared Alex's findings. Though he was concerned about how the information had been obtained, he agreed to use it as a starting point for the official investigation. Stay in the hospital as long as you can, he advised. You're safer here. We'll put surveillance on your wife and her associates. Just don't tip your hand. Act normal when she visits. So I did. I became an actor in the twisted play my life had become. When Natalie visited, bringing my favorite books and takeout from restaurants I loved, I smiled and thanked her. When she asked about my treatment plan, I told her the doctors were still running tests. When she suggested I recuperate at a wellness center in Montana rather than at home, a facility I later learned was isolated and run by Connor's brother, I non-committally said I'd consider it. Every smile, every touch, every kiss on the cheek from her now felt like poison. But I played my part, all while planning my response. I checked out of the hospital with a clear mission, justice. But I needed to be smart. Natalie still thought her plan had simply failed due to bad luck and quick medical intervention, not because I knew the truth. This gave me an advantage. The element of surprise. My first step was securing my physical safety. I told Natalie I'd be staying with Alex for a few days while our home was checked for environmental toxins that might have caused my illness. In reality, I moved into a secure apartment that Alex had arranged, with surveillance and security systems far more sophisticated than our home had ever had. From this safe location, I began building my case and planning my response. I knew I couldn't confront Natalie directly, not yet. First, I needed to ensure she would face the fullest consequences of her actions, both legally and financially. I contacted the best criminal attorney in Seattle, Marina Zhao, known for handling high-profile cases involving attempted murder and financial crimes. Her retainer was steep, but she was worth every penny. I showed her everything: the evidence of the poisoning, the financial fraud, the affairs. We need to move carefully, Marina advised during our first meeting. If she realizes you know, she might attempt something more desperate. You have strong evidence, but we need to make it bulletproof before involving law enforcement officially. Together, we crafted a comprehensive legal strategy. Marina brought in forensic accountants to trace all the money Natalie had stolen and hidden. They uncovered accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore, property purchased under aliases, and evidence of tax fraud spanning years. She's been planning this for nearly 3 years, the lead accountant told me. The first offshore account was opened 35 months ago, just after you updated your will to leave everything to her. Next, I hired a private security firm run by former FBI agents to document Natalie's activities and gather more evidence on her accomplices. Rachel Torres, the lead investigator, took the case personally. In 15 years doing this work, I've rarely seen such calculated betrayal, she said. We'll get everything you need. Rachel and her team followed Natalie, Eric, Marcus, and Connor. They photographed meetings, recorded conversations in public places, and documented the continuing conspiracy. Despite my poisoning failing to kill me, the group was already planning another attempt, this time discussing more direct methods since they feared hospital testing might have made authorities suspicious. I set up hidden cameras and recording devices in our home, all legally with my attorney's guidance. The footage captured Natalie searching my medical records, making furtive calls to her accomplices, and even practicing looking distraught in front of the mirror, presumably rehearsing for when my death was eventually announced. That on the financial front, I moved methodically. I secretly transferred my personal assets to new accounts Natalie couldn't access. I changed my insurance beneficiaries to my sister. I documented every suspicious financial transaction from the past 5 years. I reported the unauthorized transfers to the banks and filed fraud alerts with credit agencies that I compiled medical reports, police statements, and lab results from my poisoning. Detective Rivera provided official documentation of the investigation, which now included forensic evidence linking the thallium to Marcus's laboratory and financial transactions connecting Natalie to both Eric and Connor. For 2 months, I lived a double life. By day, I was the recovering husband, gradually returning to normal activities, seemingly oblivious to my wife's betrayal. I accepted her hollow displays of concern and support, all while recording every interaction. By night, I worked with my growing team of legal and investigative professionals, building an airtight case that would destroy Natalie and everyone involved in her scheme. We gathered evidence of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and tax evasion. Most importantly, I pretended everything was normal. I played the role of the oblivious, recovering husband while gathering evidence that would destroy Natalie and everyone involved in her scheme. But I even suggested we take a trip once I was fully recovered, maybe to the mountains, I proposed casually. Over dinner one evening, Natalie's eyes lit up at the mention. Aspen has beautiful resorts, she suggested immediately. We could go in September. I smiled and agreed, knowing that by September, the only trip she'd be taking would be to a federal courthouse. The hardest part of this period was maintaining the facade in public. At social gatherings with friends, I had to sit beside Natalie, holding her hand and pretending we were still the perfect couple everyone believed us to be. I had to laugh at her jokes, accept her public displays of affection, and pretend I didn't notice her texting Eric under the table. Each night, lying beside the woman who had poisoned me, I reminded myself that patience would yield the most complete justice. Each morning, I woke up and reassured myself that soon, very soon, I would reclaim my life and watch as Natalie lost everything. By August, my case was ready. My health had largely recovered, though I still experienced occasional neurological symptoms from the thallium, a permanent reminder of my wife's betrayal. The police had built a solid case against all 4 conspirators. My divorce filing was prepared, along with motions for emergency asset freezing and restraining orders against Natalie and her accomplices. All that remained was choosing the perfect moment to spring the trap. The day I executed my plan was Natalie's birthday, August 17th. She had organized a dinner party with her closest friends, including Eric, who she introduced as her colleague and mentor. The guest list included several of our longtime friends: Natalie's brother and sister-in-law, who knew nothing of her crimes, and 2 of her accomplices. Marcus had been invited but called with a last-minute excuse. Connor was there with his unsuspecting wife, who had no idea about his affair with Natalie. That I played the devoted husband all evening, complimenting her new dress, serving drinks, and proposing a touching toast to many more years of happiness together. Natalie beamed, clearly believing her secrets were safe and her plans still on track. Little did she know, I had invited Detective Rivera and my attorney to arrive at 10 p.m., along with forensic specialists from the Seattle Police Department. I had also arranged for Alex to escort a special guest, Dr. Chan, the toxicologist who had identified the thallium in my system and had now connected it to Marcus's laboratory. As Natalie was opening her gifts, the doorbell rang. The look on her face when Detective Rivera entered the room is something I'll never forget. A flash of panic quickly masked by confusion, then forced hospitality. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Detective Rivera announced, showing his badge. "Natalie Warren, we need to speak with you regarding the attempted murder of Daniel Warren." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Natalie, whose face had drained of color. Eric immediately stood up, claiming he needed to make a call. Two uniformed officers blocked his path. I stood up slowly, looking her directly in the eyes. "I know everything, Natalie. The thallium, the affairs, the money you've been hiding. I know you tried to kill me." The evidence was presented there, in our living room, in front of our friends and family. The text messages, the photos, the financial records, the testimony of Dr. Chan, who explained in clear terms how the poison had been administered and how close it had come to killing me. "This is absurd," Natalie sputtered, looking around the room for support. "Daniel is confused. The poison, it's affecting his mind. He's paranoid." But no one believed her. Not after Detective Rivera played a recording of her conversation with Eric the previous week, discussing a plan B involving a hiking accident if I didn't agree to the Aspen trip. The social fallout was immediate and devastating. Friends we'd known for years looked at her with horror. Her brother repeatedly asked, "What have you done, Nat?" Eric attempted to flee but was detained at the door. Connor's wife slapped him before being escorted out by officers. Within minutes, our house, once the scene of so many happy gatherings, had become a crime scene, with officers collecting evidence and taking statements from shocked guests. Natalie was arrested that night, along with Eric. Connor and Marcus were taken into custody at their homes. The district attorney had built a strong case and was unwilling to risk any of them fleeing or destroying evidence. My divorce filing made headlines in Seattle. Architect divorces wife who poisoned him for insurance money. With the evidence I'd gathered, the divorce proceedings were decisively in my favor. Marina Zhao was ruthless, presenting documentation of every betrayal, every stolen dollar, every conspiratorial message. Natalie's criminal defense attorney attempted to portray me as controlling and emotionally abusive, claiming that years of psychological torment had driven Natalie to desperate measures. This strategy collapsed when Marina presented videos from our home security system showing Natalie's behavior when she thought no one was watching, calmly discussing murder plots on the phone, laughing about my trust in her, bringing Eric into our home and our bed. The divorce judge, a stern woman with a reputation for fairness, was visibly disgusted by the evidence. "In 25 years on the bench," she said during the final hearing, "I have rarely seen such calculated malice disguised as matrimonial devotion." The divorce was granted in record time, with exceptional terms. I received 100% of our marital assets. Our home, which we had purchased together but which I had primarily designed and renovated, was awarded to me entirely. Natalie's retirement, accounts, investment portfolios, and personal property of value were all transferred to me as damages. Perhaps most satisfyingly, the judge ordered that Natalie's designer clothing collection, the clothes she'd worn while deceiving me, the lingerie she'd purchased for her lovers, be donated to women's shelters throughout Seattle. Her extensive art collection, including pieces we'd bought together on our anniversaries, was liquidated to establish a fund for victims of domestic poisoning cases. Natalie's reputation was destroyed beyond repair. Former friends refused to speak to her. Her employer fired her immediately after her arrest, citing moral turpitude clauses in her contract. Professional associates distanced themselves, removing her from industry boards and committees. The pharmaceutical community in the Pacific Northwest, and soon nationwide, thanks to industry publications covering the scandal, knew her as the Seattle Poisoner, a cautionary tale of greed turned to murderous intent. Even Natalie's family, initially shocked but supportive, eventually cut ties with her after the full extent of her actions came to light during the criminal proceedings. Her brother, once her closest ally, provided a victim impact statement at the criminal trial, speaking of the trauma of discovering his sister's true nature. The social destruction was comprehensive and permanent. Natalie Warren, once admired, respected, and envied, became a pariah, a name spoken in whispers, a cautionary tale told at dinner parties she would never again be invited to attend. For me, watching her social world collapse was both vindicating and heartbreaking. Despite everything she'd done, a small part of me still remembered the woman I thought I'd married. But that woman had never really existed. She was a carefully crafted illusion, a mask worn by a stranger who had shared my bed for 13 years. While the divorce proceedings were swift, the criminal case against Natalie and her accomplices was more complex. The prosecutors were particularly interested in building an airtight case, as attempted murder by poisoning cases can be challenging. To prove beyond reasonable doubt, State Prosecutor Jennifer Oakes personally took charge of the case, recognizing its high profile and the opportunity to set precedent for similar cases. This represents a particularly heinous breach of trust. She told the press, "We intend to seek justice not just for Mr. Warren, but for all victims of intimate partner violence." Natalie was charged with attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, theft, money laundering, and tax evasion. Eric faced similar charges as the primary accomplice. Marcus was charged with providing the poison and accessory to attempted murder. Connor faced charges related to money laundering and conspiracy. The preliminary hearings were tense. Natalie, once impeccably styled and confidently poised, appeared in court in standard-issue jail clothing, her hair pulled back severely, her face pale, without makeup. She pleaded not guilty to all charges, maintaining that she was being framed by me in a vindictive divorce strategy. This defense collapsed when the evidence began to be presented. Text messages describing the poisoning plan in explicit detail. Bank records showing movements of money between the conspirators. Laboratory records proving Marcus had ordered thallium compounds without proper authorization. Phone records placing all four in contact at critical times. Most damning of all were the recordings. Natalie in our home, speaking on the phone about the perfect poison, laughing about how easy it had been to convince me to increase my life insurance, discussing what she would do with the money once I was gone for good. Eric turned on Natalie almost immediately, offering to testify against her in exchange for leniency. On the stand, he revealed that the murder plot had been entirely Natalie's idea, that he had initially been reluctant but was manipulated by her promises of wealth and a new life together. "She told me Daniel was emotionally abusive," he testified, avoiding my gaze across the courtroom. "She said she lived in fear, that she needed to escape." I believed her at first. Then I realized she was lying, but by then, I was in too deep. Marcus, facing severe professional consequences beyond the criminal charges, similarly claimed to have been deceived about the purpose of the thallium. "She told me it was for a research project," he insisted. The prosecution easily disproved this with emails in which he explicitly referenced the undetectable solution and cleanup plan. Connor offered little defense. "I made a terrible mistake," he told the court. "I fell for her. She made me believe we had something special. I didn't think about the reality of what I was doing, that a real person would die." The financial investigation revealed Natalie had methodically siphoned nearly $450,000 from our joint accounts over 3 years through a complex scheme of transfers and hidden accounts. She had also been planning to liquidate our assets once. I was gone, with properties already purchased in Aspen and money transfers scheduled to begin days after my planned death. The particularly disturbing revelation came when a former colleague of Natalie's testified about overhearing her discussing untraceable poisons at a pharmaceutical conference a year earlier. "I thought she was talking about a thriller novel she was reading," the witness said. "I never imagined she was research for murder." Natalie took the stand in her own defense, a decision her attorneys had strongly advised against. She was composed at first, tearfully describing our marriage as controlling and suffocating, claiming that I had monitored her activities and isolated her from friends. All blatant lies contradicted by years of social media posts, text messages, and witness statements from our friends. Under cross-examination, Prosecutor Oakes methodically dismantled Natalie's narrative. When presented with her own text messages describing murder plans, Natalie claimed they were dark jokes between her and Eric. When shown financial records of her theft, she insisted I had verbally authorized the transfers. When confronted with the toxicologist's testimony, she suggested someone else had poisoned me to frame her. Her facade cracked when the prosecutor played a video recovered from Eric's phone. Natalie, laughing as she described how I would slowly deteriorate and how she would play the grieving widow just long enough to cash in and disappear. In that moment, Natalie's mask slipped completely. Her eyes, cold and calculating, swept the courtroom until they found mine. The hatred in her gaze was palpable, not remorse for her actions, but fury at being caught. It was the first time I'd seen the real Natalie, the woman behind 13 years of deception. The jury deliberated for just 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts for Natalie and her accomplices at the sentencing hearing. The judge, noting the calculated, cold-blooded nature of these crimes, imposed maximum sentences. Natalie's statement before sentencing, a tearful apology claiming she had been mentally unwell and manipulated by Eric, was received with visible skepticism by the court that I gave my own victim impact statement, looking directly at Natalie as I spoke. For 13 years, I believed I was married to someone who loved me, I said. Instead, I was living with someone who saw me only as an obstacle to her ambitions, a life to be sacrificed for insurance money. The physical damage from the poison may heal, but knowing that the person I trusted most in the world methodically poisoned me, that's a wound that may never fully close. When the sentences were announced, Natalie's composure finally shattered completely. She screamed and lunged toward me, having to be restrained by court officers. "You ruined everything," she shrieked, her face contorted with rage. "You were supposed to die." Those words, "you were supposed to die," spoken in open court, were the final nail in Natalie's coffin. Any lingering doubts anyone might have harbored about her guilt vanished in that moment of unfiltered rage. The outburst made national headlines, turning our case into a cautionary tale discussed on true crime podcasts and morning talk shows. Natalie received a 45-year sentence for attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy, fraud, and the other charges. With good behavior, she might be eligible for parole in her 70s. Eric received 30 years as the primary accomplice. Marcus, whose expertise had provided the means for my attempted murder, was sentenced to 20 years and permanently lost his medical and scientific licenses. Connor received 15 years for his role in the conspiracy and financial crimes. But the legal victory, while satisfying, was just one part of the justice I sought. The financial resolution proved equally devastating to Natalie and her accomplices. The criminal conviction triggered Son of Sam, laws that prevented Natalie and her co-conspirators from profiting from their crimes through book deals or media appearances. Additionally, the court ordered full restitution of all stolen funds, with interest, and imposed punitive damages that wiped out any assets they might have had remaining. My civil lawsuit against Northwest Pharma for negligence in their oversight of Marcus's laboratory and their failure to notice the missing thallium compounds resulted in a substantial settlement. The company, desperate to avoid the PR nightmare of a public trial, agreed to a confidential 8-figure settlement after my legal team presented evidence that security protocols had been repeatedly violated. That I also sued the Mountain Pine Retreat, where Natalie had attempted to lure me into dangerous situations. Their insurance company settled quickly when presented with evidence that staff had ignored Natalie's suspicious inquiries about isolated hiking trails in the depths of nearby ravines. These financial victories weren't about money, they were about accountability. Each settlement represented an acknowledgement of failure, a recognition that systems designed to protect had broken down, enabling Natalie's murderous plans. By the end of all legal proceedings, I had recovered everything Natalie had stolen, plus substantial damages. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her plot to gain my life insurance had instead left her destitute. while my financial position was stronger than ever. Financial and legal victories, however, couldn't heal the psychological wounds inflicted by Natalie's betrayal. The months following the trial were some of the darkest of my life. I struggled with insomnia, trust issues, and occasional symptoms from the thallium that remained in my system. A permanent reminder of how close I had come to death at the hands of someone I loved. I sold our Madison Park home, unable to live in a space filled with 13 years of lies. Too many memories haunted its rooms. Natalie planning my death in our kitchen, poisoning my coffee in our dining room, bringing her lovers into our bedroom. No amount of redecorating could erase those mental images. Instead, I purchased a modern loft in a downtown high-rise with state-of-the-art security and breathtaking views of Elliott Bay. The opposite of our craftsman home in every way, it represented my break with the past and my embrace of a new future. At Marina's suggestion, I began therapy with Dr. Eliza Morgan, a psychologist specializing in betrayal trauma. Our weekly sessions became a lifeline as I navigated the aftermath of Natalie's deception. What you're experiencing isn't just a reaction to the attempted murder, Dr. Morgan explained during an early session. It's the psychological impact of finding out your entire reality for 13 years was a carefully constructed lie. That's a profound trauma that affects how you view yourself and the world. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I took a sabbatical from my architectural firm, using the time to travel, solo journeys to places Natalie and I had never visited together. Kyoto in cherry blossom season, the stark beauty of Iceland, the ancient cities of Portugal. Each destination helped me reclaim my identity separate from the marriage that had nearly killed me. 6 months after the trial, I established the Thallium Survivors Foundation, a nonprofit organization supporting victims of poisoning and intimate partner violence. The foundation funded research into better detection methods for rare poisons, provided financial assistance to survivors during lengthy recoveries, and advocated for stricter regulations on toxic substances. Through this work, I connected with other survivors, men and women whose stories echoed aspects of my own. Their resilience inspired me. Their friendship, based on a shared understanding that few others could comprehend, helped heal wounds I thought would remain forever raw. Alex, who had stood by me throughout the ordeal, became a partner in both my architectural practice and the foundation. His unwavering support during my darkest days had transformed our friendship into something closer to brotherhood. You know, he said one evening as we reviewed plans for a survivor support center we were designing pro bono, most people wouldn't have had the strength to do what you did, to maintain that facade while building your case, to face her in court, to rebuild afterward. I shrugged. What choice did I have? Collapse? Let her win. Exactly, he replied. No choice at all, just like now. By the second anniversary of Natalie's arrest, I had established a new normal. My architectural practice thrived, focusing on healing spaces, rehabilitation centers, trauma recovery facilities, therapeutic communities. Each project was an act of transformation, turning places of pain into sanctuaries for recovery, a parallel to my personal journey. 5 years have passed since I discovered Natalie's betrayal. She remains in the Washington Corrections Center for Women, her appeals exhausted, her requests for parole denied. According to former friends who maintain minimal contact, she has aged dramatically, her once vibrant appearance now hollow and haggard. Occasionally, tabloid journalists attempt to interview her for Were They Now features on notorious criminals, but she rarely responds. Eric, who had hoped his cooperation would result in a reduced sentence, found that his betrayal of Natalie earned him only the contempt of his fellow inmates. He was transferred to protective custody after several incidents in the general population. Marcus, once a respected scientist, now teaches basic chemistry to fellow inmates. Connor, who received the lightest sentence, will be eligible for parole next year. As for me, I found an unexpected peace. The trust issues remain. I doubt I'll ever approach relationships with the same openness again, but they no longer dominate my life. I've had a few meaningful relationships, each one helping me relearn intimacy and vulnerability at my own pace. Last year, I adopted a rescue dog, a golden retriever like the one Natalie had given away. Rusty, with his boundless enthusiasm and uncomplicated affection, has been therapeutic in ways no human could match. Together, we hiked the mountains around Seattle, reclaiming activities that Natalie had tried to weaponize against me. My health has largely recovered. Though certain neurological symptoms persist, occasional tremors in my hands, numbness in my fingertips, intermittent migraines. Dr. Chun, who has become both a friend and a collaborator in the Foundation's research, assures me I'm one of the lucky ones. Many thallium victims never recover this completely. Last month, I received a letter from Natalie's brother, with whom I've maintained sporadic contact. He's the only member of her family who still visits her, though infrequently. She asked about you, he wrote. I think she expected you to fall apart after everything. I told her you're thriving. The Foundation, your work, your new life. She didn't respond, but I could see it bothered her. Maybe that's petty of me, but I thought you should know that in her own way, she finally understands what she lost. I don't need Natalie's regret or understanding. My victory isn't defined by her recognition of it. It's in the life I've built from the ruins of her betrayal, stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more meaningful than the false perfection we had shared. Tonight, as I write this from my terrace overlooking the Seattle skyline, Rusty sleeping contentedly at my feet, I realize that the story of my marriage to Natalie isn't just a cautionary tale about trust betrayed. It's also a testament to resilience, to the human capacity to survive devastation and rebuild something beautiful from the wreckage. The price of trust, when betrayed, is devastatingly high. But the reward of reclaiming your life, of refusing to be defined by someone else's betrayal, that's beyond measure. Natalie tried to write the end of my story with poison. Instead, she only succeeded in forcing me to begin a new, better chapter without her. And in that, perhaps, lies the most complete victory of all. That if you found this story compelling, please subscribe to our channel for more real-life accounts of betrayal and its consequences. Remember, these stories are shared not to promote vengeance, but to illustrate the human capacity for resilience in the face of profound betrayal. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better.